welcome to the very first installment of my little videos. I'm going to do some deep dives into the wonderful tales that we all know and love, starting with the wonderful. If you don't know them, you will. The Brothers Grimm, everybody knows. It's the foundation of all our childhoods, every once upon a time, and although we associate all of the fairy tales that the Brothers Grimm wrote, they didn't actually write any of them. They were first known as folk tales, handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth, and it is unknown where they first started, but the Brothers Grimm did collect these. They first published their very first collection in 1812, which consisted of only 86 little tales. They did go on to revise this into 7 other instalments, and the last instalment was in 1857, and the 86 little tales had skyrocketed to 210. The first couple of editions were heavily criticised by the people that received them, as although they were marketed as children's tales, tales for children, tales to tell around the fire or at bedtime, the content in these stories was deemed as unsuitable for children, as it included a lot of violence, a hell of a lot of sexual references, and they had to tone these down for their audience, as most folk tales, when gone verbally from adult to adult, didn't mind the sexual references and the violence. However, when it came to the children, adults were not comfortable with giving them the sexual references. So in later editions, I think from the third one on to the end, the sexual references were toned down, as in, I think there was a part in Rapunzel where she kept letting the prince into her tower, and they had a lot of fun in that tower for months. And it was only when her clothes began getting tighter that she realised that there was something going on. So in the later editions, the sexual content was extremely toned down, but in contrast, they upped the violence, especially when it came to the comeuppance of the villains. So we are going to start with the first tale that they always seem to start with, which is a tale called The Frog King, or Iron Heinrich, and I've probably butchered that because I've never spoke German at all. So this one, for example, in the retelling had 3 different beginnings, as a folktale was supposed to be embellished and improved on time. So the first edition of The Frog King in 1812 starts as this way. Once upon a time there lived a princess. One day she went into the forest and sat down by a cool well. A golden ball was her favourite toy. She loved to amuse herself by throwing it up into the air and catching it when it came back down. That's it. That's the beginning. That was the first one. It's a good first draft. However, in 1819, in another redo of it, it was, once upon a time there lived a princess who was so bored that she didn't know what to do. She took a golden ball that she liked to play with and went out into the forest. In the middle of the woods there was a well with clear, cool water. She sat down next to it and threw the ball in the air, then caught it, and that's how she amused herself. So as you can see, from the first edition to the second, maybe the second, they have embellished a little, made it a bit more reader-friendly. However, by the 7th edition in 1857, the opening was more to be told rather than read, and when read out loud, it tended to fire the imagination instead. So, once upon a time, when wishes still came true, there lived a king who had beautiful daughters. The youngest was so lovely that even the sun, which had seen so many things, was filled with wonder when it shone upon her face. There was a deep, dark forest near the king's castle, and in that forest, beneath an old linden tree, was a spring. Whenever the weather turned really hot, the king's daughter would go out into the woods and sit down at the edge of the cool spring. and if she was bored, she would take out her golden ball, throw it up in the air, and catch it. That was her favourite plaything. So, as you can see from that, they tended to embellish their tales as every edition went on. A folk tale is made to be embellished, it's made to be interpreted, it is never set in stone. So I really enjoyed the Disney version, The Princess and the Frog, which came out a few years ago. I really thought it was quite fun, and they've got one of the best villains in there. I loved him. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it because I can't. It can't get further apart from the book that we have right now, especially the original versions. Disney did not want their princesses to behave violently and bloodthirstily, which is what ended up being in the Grimm tale. And to be quite honest, I don't blame her. The frog was a right pain in the backside, to be honest. He wanted to eat off her plate, follow her home, sleep in her bed, underneath, on her pillow next to her head. And given that it isn't a proper frog, it's a bit suspect. So the princess was getting kind of annoyed, shall we say, at this intrusion into her life just because he went to the bottom of a pond and got a ball back. So the princess, the lovely, wonderful little princess, ended up picking up the frog and throwing it against a wall, hoping to kill it, so that she would not have to deal with it anymore. No kissing, no true love's kiss, nothing like that. She threw it against the wall, hoping to kill it, and it magically turned into a handsome prince. No kissing necessary. She doesn't even have to like the guy, to be honest. But they were married at the insistence of her father, who probably found this strange man in his wonderful little daughter's bedroom and insisted that they be married. And I don't believe there is a happily ever after. No, a happily ever after does not even come into it. They ride off in a coach pulled by white horses with the prince's faithful servant Heinrich, who never makes another appearance in this story, didn't even go visit the pond where the prince was turned into a frog or stopped him being turned. You never get an explanation for that. It just is. And that is the end of the tale. Oh, and Heinrich has 3 iron bands around his middle, which break when the prince is now happy because his heart is so full at the joy of getting his master back. We never get an explanation as to why Heinrich had to wear the bands around him or who put them there, because I'm assuming the sorceress who turned the prince into a frog put them there, but you don't get that explanation either. It is a fun tale for children to read and imagine, and I really enjoyed it. And if you haven't read the Brothers Grimm Little Tales, I really, really recommend that you do, even with the Disney versions probably being the first versions that you would see of these tales now. I would highly recommend to give them a check out. They've been going the past 2 centuries. I think they come highly recommended, and without them, if they hadn't collected all these tales, the word of mouth folk tales would have died. I believe they would have died. We wouldn't have the interpretations that we have of them today, and for them to endure 210 years and more and be immortalised by Disney and the like of Pixar, who have picked up a few of them as well, I think it's really an achievement. That is going to do it for my very first little recording, and I will be making others whether people watch them or not, because I really enjoy recording it. So yeah, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Thank you and goodbye.